listening to the Good Girl Podcast, a podcast of women's confessions about our flaws, faith, femininity, and culture. I am Cameo King, your host. I created this podcast as a space for healing, as a space for freedom, so we can truly be ourselves and destigmatize the messy process of life. I think there's this idea that we just come into this world, we're supposed to know stuff, and I don't believe we know how much we don't know, and that a lot of what we do is by trial and error, in terms of figuring ourselves out, figuring out what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and just how to navigate life. And I think we harshly judge ourselves and we harshly judge others when we simply mess up. And so I want to have conversations about how we mess up. And I call those conversations confessions. It is okay. We will still be all right. We're still good as we are going through this process of life. This week's confession, y'all know I'm always excited about it, but there are very few people who stump me in the interview process, meaning I am at a loss for words in terms of what question to ask next. So this means I need to step my interviewing game up. But when someone gives answers that are so complete and so full and so deep and so self-explanatory that there really isn't a follow-up question needed, I'm kind of stumped. Because I'm usually asking people like, unpack that, tell me more, what you mean? But no. This young woman, one of the people that Cameo step your game up. I was listening back to the unedited version, and I was like, girl, you ain't had nothing to say. But let's listen to whom this week's confession is coming from. Courtney Smith has always had a servant's heart.
My sister said that when I was in third grade, I took her piggy bank and I took it to school to get people lunch.
From the beginning, she put the needs of others first.
She said that I was always an intuitive and giving person, even while we were going through all the things that we were going through.
Courtney lived a significant part of her life in foster care, where she began to carry the weight of rejection.
Being in various different foster homes, and just initially as a child feeling unwanted, you're hopping from home to home to home, and then nobody wants you, right? And so you're feeling like you're not good enough, that there's something wrong with you because you're just hopping from place to place.
Courtney said it was difficult to see beyond her circumstances because she was focused on surviving, but that didn't stop her.
I began to learn more about myself and began to see glimpses of my future. And that the desires that I had, though I couldn't see them, I had desires, I couldn't see them manifesting. I began to really see my own power. And part of that was being in theater groups and reading. I was an avid reader. I read books, really helped me to escape my reality and unlocked areas of my life where I couldn't dream, because I was able to visualize myself in these characters that I was reading as a child.
This ability to dream gave way to who she is today, the CEO of the Detroit Phoenix Center, a nonprofit that provides critical resources like housing, food, and water for Detroit teens and young adults who are experiencing homelessness. But there's one more goal Courtney has for the Detroit Phoenix Center. It's equity.
So oftentimes in really impoverished communities, and I'm sure you know this, that it is an unequitable distribution of resources. So that means that they have education, they have access to jobs, they have those things that will empower them, enable them to live out their potential. So when they are little them, they won't say, I couldn't see past my circumstance because I was so busy surviving, but that they're able to dream, because that's what kids are supposed to do and not live in nightmares.
All right. So I know y'all felt some of that power in that interview. I know you felt some of Courtney's spirit in that short little snippet. So her confession is 20 times more powerful than that. So let's hop right into her confession. But before we do that, let's listen to a quick word from our sponsors. Join the efforts to transform your community. The Lansing's People Assembly is meeting this Saturday, November 21st, to transform the city of Lansing. The goal: safety for all residents. It's this Saturday, November 21st from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. You can head to lansingpeoplesassembly.org to register. Again, that's lansingpeoplesassembly.org. And also, do not forget, we know that the presidential election is over, but the fight for Black lives remain. Please join Lansing for Black Lives tomorrow for its official kickoff event. It's entitled Homecoming. It's tomorrow, November 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. Lansing for Black Lives is a collective that centers and is led by and rooted in Black communities. Head to l4bl.org to register. Again, that's L as in Lansing, the number 4, B as in Black, L as in Lansing.org to register. Okay, real quick, just wanted to give a little bit more information about Courtney to really add some depth to what you're about to hear. Because her confession is deep, y'all. I'm gonna stop talking, but let me just share this with you very briefly. So Courtney was recently dubbed a modern day history maker by Essence Magazine. She also had national recognition from Comcast Newsmakers as well as the Steve Harvey Show. Courtney was also named to Crain's Detroit business list of 20 in their 20s. And she is also Michigan Chronicles 40 Under 40 honoree, and she's a double-time recipient of the Spirit of Detroit Award. And that's just what we know on the surface level. She's also a contributing writer at Rolling Out Magazine, and she is currently pursuing a graduate coursework at Harvard University. So this will provide a lot of context to what she is sharing and why is it important and why it will, I am confident, why it will change your life. Listen up. So Courtney, I'm so excited to have you on the Good Girl podcast. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Cameo. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited for your confession. I know I say that all the time when people come on, but I'm telling you, like the power of freeing yourself, the power of sharing, the power of being vulnerable, it is really transformative. And the nuggets that people share, the wisdom that they share through their life, like I'm telling, like y'all getting this for free. Like what you're about to share, it's free for folks, but it wasn't free for you. Like you had to go through some things to come to this conclusion.
Yeah.
And you still, and when I say go through, these are things you cannot put a price on. You can't put a price on life experiences. You can't even create some of these things to get you to some of these conclusions and to some of these whole spaces as a whole person.
Yeah.
So always excited about confessions and about what they can do, not for just you, but for the folks that are listening, like pushing them deeper. So they can get to their whole space. So I'm going to stop talking, Courtney, and I am going to hand it over to you and ask you what I ask every guest that comes on here. Yes. What is your confession?
My confession is I did not know who I was apart from the accomplishments, my awards, my titles, and my achievements. So I was going through life. And this is something I'm still going through and unpacking, is that I was going through achieving all of these things and having these titles and this identity that I embraced. And I didn't know who I was apart from these things. So I had to learn that apart from those accomplishments, those achievements, that I am worthy, that I am valuable, that if all those things were taken away from me, that I would still be worthy of love, that I will be worthy of acceptance, that I am worthy because I am worthy.
I feel you even pushing and healing in this moment.
Yes, I am. And I would be remiss if I would say that it's something that I'm totally there. I'm not there all the way, but at least my confession is something that I acknowledge and I know what is true. And how I'm walking through that, it is a transparent journey that I'm still on right now.
I want you to tell us why even as you were confessing your truth.
Yeah.
There are two different types of confessions. Like you can confess where you are, and then you
Yeah.
can confess, this is what I know to be true. This may be how I feel. This may have been what I thought, but this is also
Yes.
what I know to be true. And
Mm-hmm.
so as you were confessing, you essentially did all those three things in one confession.
Yeah.
What brought you to tears? Because I felt that. I felt it. I felt it.
Brought me to tears is because it was a real confession. Because oftentimes when you think about a confession, it's something that we don't necessarily always feel comfortable sharing. It's something that's deep rooted and deep seated. Essentially, it's a secret. A secret is oftentimes not supposed to be shared, or it wouldn't be a secret. But even as I was sharing, I recognized the freedom that I am embarking on. And even the first step of that freedom was that acknowledgement of that truth. And then the second part of that is me living out that, but also recognizing that I'm still on that journey and that it is hard and it is ugly and that it is painful. Yeah. But it is so beautiful, all at the same time. And so what brought me to tears was that reality that this is a transparent confession.
Yeah. I don't know if as a society, Courtney, we fully understand what it means to identify ourselves outside of titles. And that's what your confession is saying. And even when you said, if on today they strip me of all my titles, the goal in wholeness is that I am still worthy. I'm still confident. I am still loved. I am like everything that I have now.
I would still have.
Yes. And I'm still do it.
Yes. Yep. Apart from it all.
Yes.
Yep. And that's what's significant. Because we have to look at inside of ourselves. And I had to do this and really dig deeper and say, what is my motivation? What am I motivated by? And if it's all of this external, then it's not sustainable. And so I had to really and still dig into myself and say, like, if this is who I am, that whole servant leader piece, then these titles and all this other stuff, it really doesn't matter because this is who I was created to be.
How did you get to that place? I don't think getting to that place is easy, especially when we live, work, and play in a society that is attracted to that. We are affirmed by our titles and our accomplishments.
Yes.
Because if I'm honest, like Courtney, if you didn't have some of your titles, if you didn't have some, like you probably wouldn't get the same type of, or anybody wouldn't get the same type of attention if they didn't have some of their titles or accomplishments. So how do you begin to move to that place? Because it's like I know you mentioned this, but to emphasize it more, like it's deep work.
Yes.
It is ugly work because you're beginning to strip your ego.
Yes, 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 yes.
And
And also your identity. So
mm,
for me, it really started with me recognizing that the titles that I held were so they were essentially my gods.
mm,
And I was leading unhealthy because I hadn't unpacked my trauma. I hadn't unpacked my need to please people. I hadn't unpacked, like, why am I aiming for perfection instead of accepting just excellence? I had to unpack that. And it was me hiding behind those titles. And it was, moments where I was talking with my therapist, and she really helped me to realize, like, wait, like, you're leading unhealthy. And so I really had to take a moment and think and unpack all of that childhood trauma. And then after I was unpacking that childhood trauma, I realized that I only deemed myself worthy, even as a child, even as a teenager, that once I achieved these things, then I was where I needed to be. Then I was worthy of love and acceptance. Then I was successful. Then I could be loved. Then I could be valuable. But then here I am, nearly 30, and I have these things, but then yet and still, there's still a disconnect. And it was because, and I had to realize, I had to love myself and not attach the achievement to the love that I have for myself.
yeah.
Yeah, because at the time I needed something tangible, and I hid behind it all until it all blew up. And a lot of that came through failure.
I remember someone sharing with me, and it may not be a quote, but the sentiments were like, if there is, in order to make yourself feel happy, content, or peace, or bring you joy, if it is something outside of you, we need to reassess. Um, and
Yep.
and I say that, not to say like things and people and accomplishments and
Mm-hmm.
family and things like that cannot bring you joy or happiness or things like that. But what it is it the foundation? Is it
Yes.
the core of
Yes.
of your joy and your fulfillment? So if God forbid, you had a child, God forbid you had a spouse and they fell off the face of the earth, it should not be the end of who that person is. That doesn't mean you won't be devastated. That doesn't mean,
Yes.
God forbid, you go to school and you get your bachelor's degree or you get your PhD, whatever it is, and you have to drop out of the program. That shouldn't be the end of a person's identity.
Yes, yes, yes. And I remember going through this deeply. And I shared this during my first interview, and it was just really a pivotal moment of my life as I was building out my organization. And the work that I do is humble work, it's hard work, it's really service to youth, to families in the community that are often overlooked. And as I was building out this organization, the organization that I lead, I had a tragedy that occurred. And it was literally on the day that the Detroit Phoenix Center opened, I got the most devastating news that I could ever receive. And that was that my youngest brother transitioned by suicide.
Wow.
And there was a moment when that happened, I thought to myself, how can I be this human service professional? How am I, building this center for youth, and my teenage brother transitioned by suicide? And I really took that on, that guilt and that shame, not even really knowing as much as I know now about mental health and mental illness. And what I did was I really, I often say that deep-seated pain can cripple us or force us to show up in the world as a greater version of ourselves. And it essentially helped me to show up as a greater version of myself. For the first 2 years, I was going hard to really serve the community and to really show up. But what I was doing was I was overcompensating in other ways for the pain and the tragedy of my brother's transition. So that it was a moment where a young person that I serviced, we had a suicide scare, and we had to get them to the hospital. And I remember just spiraling because I was so triggered by that. And the young person talked about the organization saving their life. And it was in that moment that I was like, how could I be this to all these young people? And I couldn't be that to my brother. But I had to unpack that with my therapist, that I couldn't hold on to that, because that guilt, that shame, owning that transition, because that wasn't mine to bear. And I was leading unhealthy, because anytime there was a moment like that, I was triggered.
What does that look like practically when you say leading unhealthy? Because I think we have an idea of what healthy leadership looks like. You talked about servant leadership. I think we have some type of, especially in the current environment we are in, with transitioning from one administration to the next on the national level. So we have some idea of what unhealthy leadership looks like. But what did it look like on a personal level when you talk about, not not addressing your trauma, or not connecting your unhealthy leadership to your trauma?
What it looks like was me overworking myself, working myself to the point where I was sick, not telling people that I was sick. If I was in the hospital, I wasn't sharing anything. I was responding to emails in the hospital bed. I was literally at points spending the night at my center, and not recognizing that there's limitations into the work that I do. I remember it was during winter. I'll never forget this. It was during winter, and we were running an emergency winter shelter for youth in the community. And I remember being in the shelter, supporting the youth throughout that time. And I hadn't been home for 3 days. And then when I got home, I found out that there were radiators. My complex had put radiators outside of my apartment. And that was because I didn't have it at home. And our whole complex, the heat went out. And I didn't know that for 3 days, I didn't have heat at my own house, because I was at the shelter making sure that everyone there had heat. And that is a very tangible example of what it looks like to lead unhealthy.
And I'm so glad you pointed those things out, because if someone else were to take this story, and we live in the grind culture. I think the narrative is shifting, but where people mistake the word grind for that type of unhealthy leadership, where people would congratulate you and attaboy you and say, Courtney doing her thing, and praising you. And, being, we very much live in a culture as well where we praise self-sacrifice for the sake of the greater good. And so I'm so glad you, and so specifically, because it's even in the little things. It's like, oh no, I'm just grinding from my hospital bed. Just versus literally focusing on your own self and your healing. The other thing you brought up, and this hit home, because this is something I'm continuing to work out of, when you talk about perfectionism and how perfectionism, again, is connected to our trauma, or it is an adaptation or an expression of us feeling as though we have to reach a certain level or be something or do something in order to be worthy of something, someone, something, a job, to be loved. Like I have to do X, Y, and I have to do it perfectly so I can get that thing. But we don't talk about how damaging that is. How damaging that is to the person and how, girl. So share that a little bit, because I know for me, because I'm telling you, when you said that, I said, my God, it literally, for me, it robs you of moments. It robs you of living your life because you're so caught up in what you should be doing better. You do not you look back over your life and you literally don't remember moments because you're so caught up in the next and being better. And did you hit this moment?
Yes. And that is true. And I can say so much about that, but because I had conditioned myself to believe that my value was rooted in accomplishment, that because my work ethic and it yielded positive results, I kept going for the more. Like it was nothing ever good enough for me, that I just wanted more and more. And so I had adapted. I remember being in college and having this really recognizing it wasn't until college that I recognized these extremes. So in college, if anyone looks at my transcript, they're going to see these extremes. I was either the absolute best. Very tangible. One semester I had a 4.0. Next semester I had a 0.0. I couldn't find a medium. And that is the best example of what, if I could give a lens into my life, it have to be the absolute best or nothing at all. There's not I didn't know how to find that medium.
The quote that I just pulled from you, if you want to call it a quote, but because your work ethic yielded positive results. We tend not to pay attention to, whether this is good behavior. I'll say healthy or unhealthy behavior, because it yielded positive results. And I think that is one of the themes that I'm hearing you say, and something that we're clearly addressing in this conversation, is that a lot of our accomplishments and our productivity in this grind culture is accepted because it yields positive results. But it is unhealthy behavior. And other piece of it, Courtney, is we talk about these standards we have for ourselves, like perfectionism. You got to work, you got to do all this other stuff. But I had a conversation with a woman a long time ago when I used to work in radio. And I don't know, she was the second person in charge of the radio station, like the manager or something like that. And she said she dealt with perfectionism too. And she told me, and she said so much so that, and this is when it rocked my world, because I guess she saw it in me. She said it destroyed her marriage. Her own perfectionism destroyed her marriage. And I'm bringing this up, Courtney, because I'm curious as to how your confession, how these behaviors, how your attitude affected your relationships around you.
Yes. They have definitely had an impact on the relationships around me. I did not spend time with my friends. I was the one that they would invite to everything, and I would never show up because I needed to work. My siblings, even still to this day, I've gotten a lot better. They say, "Oh, you answering the phone," like simple little things like that. And also pushing. So it's my personal relationships, and then it's the professional. And I would set these standards for myself that I would project onto my team members, that I would project onto others, that would literally cause others to have anxiety. I didn't know how to extend grace, because I'm like, if I'm grinding, if I'm showing up, if I'm doing this, surely you can too.
Girl, preach a whole word, because that's it. And then you look, at people sideways when they don't. It's like, well, why aren't you staying up 24 hours to get?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Like, surely you can get discharged from the hospital and the same day show up to work. Absolutely, you can do that. You can do that. And it was my therapy journey that really helped me to see, like, wait, like, this is not a realistic expectation. I cannot project this onto others, because this is not healthy. Yeah. And so when I released myself from those expectations, then I noticed that I actually became a better leader. Even with the young people that I service, they really helped me a lot, because my life looked very different from theirs as a youth, because as a youth, I threw myself into accomplishments and achievements. But the young people that I service, because of barriers in their lives, may not have had that level of access. And so I even had to learn how to extend grace in my professional life. I knew how to extend it to the youth. That wasn't an issue for me, but it was the adults around me. It was my colleagues. It was the people that worked for, my team members. And it really took a lot for me to be able to say, like, you know what? I can't project this onto them, because it's not fair.
Yeah. I was, you listen, you were a little bit, I think you may have been a little bit softer than I. Everybody got it with my perfectionism. Like, everybody, kids, parents, grandma, work, everybody got it. Everybody. And so, how did you begin to transition? How did you begin to release yourself of those expectations? I hear you mentioning therapy, and I am a staunch advocate of therapy. So was it just therapy?
No.
Okay.
It wasn't just therapy. It was failure. It was failure. Okay. It's so crazy how you how you have these juxtaposing realities of, like, you're aiming for perfection, and then because of that, you absolutely fail, because you didn't leave any grace. You didn't leave any room for mistakes. So it was failure that really helped me to unpack this. And the way that it happened was failure after failure after failure. And because I was failing, I didn't deem myself worthy of these accomplishments. I didn't deem myself worthy of even the title that I had, the titles, the leadership expectations. It was through my failure that I really had to learn, like, one, being a perfectionist is not healthy. Like, it's unrealistic more than anything. And let's aim for excellence. Number two, through my failure, I learned, like, it's okay to fail. Like, failure over and over again in my professional life was probably the best thing that happened to me, that happened for me, not to me, that happened for me, because it was something that I was trying to avoid. But when it happened, it really helped me to say, okay, I'm still this title. Like, I'm still, this person that needs to show up in these different ways. I'm still a human being. And for some way, shape, or form, I really, like, had detached myself from being a human. I thought that I was like a superwoman. And we could talk about that with Black women, right? How we feel that we have to wear those super capes. But I had to take it off, because it wasn't sustainable. So it was really failure that helped me to really shy away from the perfectionism.
So how do you maintain this space of continuing to extend grace to yourself And because I think it's one thing, and I think you mentioned this, I think it's one thing to extend grace to everybody else, but
yes,
work from a space of, trauma, or when you're working from this space of, or trying to work out of the mindset of perfectionism, or that I have to be something to be worthy. You are often, you set standards for yourself, but not standards for other people. Or like, I can extend grace to so-and-so, but I can't extend grace to myself because I know better. I think that's sometimes a space we're in. So how do you continue to pull back these layers and continue to extend grace to yourself?
It's definitely through my faith. It's definitely through my faith and my revelation of who God is, because part of my perfectionism was also attached to my lack of faith, because I didn't believe that God's grace was sufficient for my weakness, because I didn't want to acknowledge that I had any weaknesses. So it's truly my faith and realizing my identity, which goes back to my identity apart from all of these things that, because of my perfectionism, I was trying to obtain. But then once I really identified with who I was in God and who I really am, that I am worthy, that I am the apple of God's eye, that I am a child of God. So if nothing else, like, I am going to have everything that I need, and I don't have to get that all on my own, if you will. And I have to release that notion that I was big enough, I was bold enough. It's so deep. It's so deep. And I don't want to talk in circles, but it's so deep for me to even think that I had that enough power to create my own identity.
Girl, I want to throw a shoe at you. Like, if we was in the same room, you would have had a couple shoes upside your head.
No, seriously, like, I literally I just got to go back to the answer. I had to know who I was in God, and it's really my faith, and it's really me getting a deeper revelation of who God is in me, that I'm continually, and I'm able to walk out the freedom that I have.
That's it. That is when I picked up my shoe, because so just sharing and hopefully adding to this conversation and relating to what you're saying, and you even affirming some things within me. It's like God told me, like, what? So do you think my atonement work on the cross doesn't apply to you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you think you gonna do your best to walk around here sin-free, whatever. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I do not know what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. And so it's me not acknowledging my weaknesses. It was me also getting praised by society because I hit this certain I hit these benchmarks, or because it yielded positive results. And so I was right. But inside is like, no.
Yep. And it's quantifiable, right? You can measure it. You can measure the awards. You can measure the salary. You can measure, the titles. You can measure all of that. But the stuff that I had to learn to identify with was the stuff that you can't measure. Your character, right? How you're treating people, your faith, right? Where are you when all that stuff, like at night, how do you feel about yourself?
Listen. How do you feel when you're laying in the bed, when you're all alone?
Yes.
How do you feel about yourself? And I used to think this don't laugh at me, Courtney, this may be corny, but it's that one line in Beyonce's song, I think it's Pretty Hurts, or it's like in her intro, and it's like an announcer, or he says something, And he simply asked, are you happy? And it didn't hit me until later. But when we're at home by ourselves, and you can interchange happy with different words. Are you at peace? Are you full of joy? Are you content?
Yes.
A lot of that is connected to happy. But
yes,
when you're by yourself in the deepest part of your soul, are you happy?
Yes. Or even like for me, because I know some of the work that I do doesn't always lend itself to happy. And that's part of the sacrificial work, the servant leadership work. But are you beyond that? Like for me, it was like, are you healthy? Are you joyful? Are you, content? Do you yes, all those other adjectives, but I have to be sure to say like happy wasn't always that benchmark out of transparency, but it was also like, are you healthy?
Yeah.
And I was not healthy.
Yeah. Courtney, this conversation blew me away. Like I didn't, it had been on my heart for a while. And, I attribute a lot of my things that I can't measure, the measurables, to the Holy Spirit. And so I just felt, it was like, oh yeah, no, tap Courtney, ask her if she wants to be on The Good Girl. And I see why. My God.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. I appreciate the platform. And I appreciate even these conversations are freeing to be able to share the deep work that has been happening with me over the last few months, and to share parts of myself that I haven't shared publicly, that I'm sharing now. I appreciate you yielding to the Holy Spirit and inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, I thank you so much, Courtney, for being on here. This conversation was really, the word great doesn't justify it, but it is, I believe, revelatory for, I think, a lot of us, and will hopefully be a catalyst for us to begin to examine who we really are, who we want to be, and also who society has told us we should be. So we can really get to our heart and really live our best lives and what we're called to do. So again, thank you so much, Courtney, for being on the Good Girl podcast.